Hey everyone, welcome to Starseed Oracle, or welcome back if you are returning. Today we're going to get into the question of how our wounds are a part of our destiny. And this is through looking at the lens of Chiron, the wounded healer, in astrology and mythology, with the North Node. And in last week's video, I got way into the nodes. So if you're curious about that, feel free to check out that video. But essentially, we're looking at kind of the North Node as this place of forward moving, of where our life path is taking us, kind of our destiny. Or taking on that sort of lens with this question. So if you want to skip ahead to the pile selection, feel free to check out the timestamps. Otherwise, I'm going to get in a little bit to the Chiron myth and just a little bit about the archetype to help kind of ground us before we get into the reading. So the North Node and Chiron have been in a long-term conjunction since January of this year, and will still be kind of in that 5-degree orb through, I believe, April, the end of April. So this energy has been with us most of this year, or all of this year really, and I want to get into it because this next eclipse that's happening on the 8th is going to be to the minute exactly conjunct Chiron in the sky. So it feels very potent to be speaking about the Chiron archetype and what that means for all of us right now. Chiron was a centaur, which is like half man, half horse. And he was known to be a really skilled healer and a teacher. He was a mentor. He was really good at anything that was important and significant that you'd want to know, like Chiron would know. He's also an astrologer and an oracle too. And so the myth of Chiron has a lot to do. The reason why he's called the wounded healer is because he was wounded on accident from an arrow from Heracles, which was a poisoned arrow. And so because Chiron was immortal, he had this wound then that he could never heal, but he wouldn't die. So he was essentially just in a state of suffering. And eventually he sacrificed himself for Prometheus, bringing fire to the humans, got punished by the gods and sent away. So he was like sent to suffer eternity, being like chained to this rock and like in really gross fashion having his like liver, I believe, being like pecked out over and over again. Pretty horrible. So Chiron essentially was like, let me take his place. And then the gods lifted him up in that, like, the way that he sacrificed himself for Prometheus. It took away his immortality essentially, and then he was allowed to be up in the stars. So we have the constellation, and yeah, so that's basically in a nutshell his story. But he taught many of the important figures in Greek mythology. So he's definitely known as being this great teacher. And in astrology, when we look at Chiron in a birth chart, we really are looking to the deep wounds that we carry, that we spend a lot of time in our own life trying to heal, which makes us then really great healers for others in that same area, because it is something that requires a lot from us, a lot of our strength and attention. So the actual phrase came from Jung, the psychologist Jung, speaking of the Chiron myth as being the wounded healer. A quote from him says, "It is in his own hurt that gives a measure of his power to heal." So essentially that's saying, right, like our wounds drive us towards healing always. And so that gives us a lot of power in the story and in the path of finding our own healing. giving us our own power to heal, not just ourselves, but others. So I think the other interesting thing that's important to mention around the way Jung speaks about the wounded healer, also in terms of the teacher, mentor, or in his case, like the psychologist and the client, is just this way that like embracing the wounded healer archetype, essentially. It's like there's no separation between like a healed person and a patient, and having that kind of like, if we're not actually like, if you fall into sort of the danger of separating those two things, it can really inflate like the ego of the person who's offering the help or the support, to think that they're somehow more better or whatever, or have this kind of like higher status. But when we can actually embrace like this idea of the wounded healer, it actually allows, like in helping professions and in service professions, like it really helps us to meet clients from the perspective of like the power we all have within us to heal ourselves. So I think the other really significant thing for me about the Chiron story is this idea that in order to release the suffering, Chiron made this huge sacrifice, right, of his immortality. And I was thinking of that today in preparing this reading, of just really wanting to ask that question of like, what part of our suffering, how might we best sacrifice our suffering around this wound, is one of the questions that I have. Because this, the reason so much of us struggle, I think, reaching points of healing is because we stay stuck in the suffering piece. And I feel like with the Chiron story, it is really powerful to think of ways to work with our own suffering. So like we might always carry certain wounds in our life, but that doesn't stop us from being whole and from experiencing healing, in terms of reaching that more wholeness sense of self. It's really the suffering, which is the piece that causes the most pain. So that's definitely a question I wanted to get into today. So I think that's everything. Hopefully that was, helpful, if it, or gave a good little background there on why we're coming to this reading today, to engage with these energies. And like I said, the next eclipse has really significant contact with Chiron in the sky, and so it's a big time, I feel like, for everyone to be looking at this. And I've kind of realized the readings that I'm doing, that it actually works really well of like, every time we go through a transit in the sky, that energy, it comes to the surface, it's very apparent for that time period, but we carry it through our lives, especially the longer transits. And so I hope that these readings then are just me kind of like capturing a moment in time that can be accessed as like medicine for whenever anyone comes across the reading. So instead of kind of looking at these as like entryways into different like portals of time, like this is really, I really see these as timeless. So whenever you're coming across this, you're meant to find it. And I hope that you find value here. So we'll get into it. So today we have 3 piles. We've got pile 1 with the lepidolite, pile 2 with the teardrop labradorite, and pile 3 with the onyx. And feel free to choose any or all piles, whatever is calling to you at this time, and just let your intuition kind of like guide you to whatever is pulling most on you at this time. And yeah, I'll give you a moment and then I'll see you at your reading. Hey group 1, y'all chose the lepidolite slice here. Put this over here. And these oracle cards. Oh, actually I also do that. We're going to look at those at the end. But first, I really want to look at just messages from Chiron. Chiron, just to let us know, to let you, group 1, collective watching this. What does Chiron want us to know? What does Chiron want you to know about this wound that comes to mind when you think of a Chiron wound? Chiron wounds are like, they're just the ones that we, like I said in the intro, spend a lot of time with. The ones that just kind of keep coming back to the surface, that no matter how much we do our healing, there's still always a little bit there. And yeah, that's what I want to get into today. So we're asking Chiron, what would you like group number 1 to know about this wound? Oh, wow, okay. And the High Priestess on the table. Okay. I'm gonna get one more card for that question. All right. Chiron, what else to know about this wound? Just how I want you to know about this wound. Oh geez, so many cards just fell out. Hold on. Let's try that again. Okay, the world, the universe. So we've got High Priestess showing up along with the world. Okay, group 1, I'm really feeling with the High Priestess and the World card coming through to answer this question around wounding. It feels really tied to just to the integration process in itself, and wounding around maybe being able to trust yourself or to feel like your intuitive instincts are something that you actually can have faith in or belief in. Like it makes me feel maybe there was some kind of split or something that happened that created a sense of distrust of self. And yeah, like I say split because I'm looking at like the universe card, which we think of as completing a cycle, or yeah, just like being in that state of wholeness also. It just feels like the wound is really tied to sort of your own suffering, perhaps around not feeling connected. Really, that actually feels like a big part of it too. Just like feeling really cut off from your higher self, or from source, or the divine, whatever word that you use. Just feeling kind of like flat, maybe, or like abandoned, perhaps, in this life. And these cards make me think too that this goes beyond just this experience of this in this lifetime. Like this could be something you carried into this life already, sort of having that distrust of yourself and like your own ability to access things beyond yourself. Yeah, I feel like there's a great desire for integration here, and for like experiencing what it means to be like in alignment with this kind of energy, but that there's just like this sense that that's inaccessible to you, or like just not possible for some reason. So maybe you're like constantly seeking that externally, through different experiences of varying intensities, to try to like tap yourself back into that. But that it's something that's like almost insatiable in a way. This is really reminding me of the energy of Sun Pluto that can happen with, if you have aspects between the Sun and Pluto in the chart, where it's just kind of this like insatiable desire in a way of like constant regenerating of self, and of having these really like intense experiences. Yeah, but it really, I feel like self-trust is a huge thing when it comes to being able to trust your own inner guidance. Like that feels like it's coming through really strongly around what the wound is about. I'm going to draw a couple more cards for the next question and see if it builds on to this. So the next question I wanted to ask is how might we best sacrifice our suffering around this wound? So group number one, how might group one best sacrifice their own suffering around this wound? Of course, with the intention that that is then gonna help you evolve or heal. Or integrate, perhaps, in this. Best sacrifice their suffering around this wound. the Ace of Swords coming through with the Five of Pentacles. So in terms of this question, like, yeah, how might we best sacrifice our suffering around this wound? Like, the Ace of Swords coming through is about that clear vision, about clarity, about clearing away whatever this distortion is that has been keeping you from being able to access your intuition or from being able to trust it. I think it's, you know, a positive sign to see this card coming through, and it's really speaking to like clearing our mind and entering into states of deep stillness in our mind, finding ways to use that silence to awaken then the messages, to allow them to flow through more clearly. This really gives me the sense of like offering up our mental chatter, our mental worry, just like letting it be like these clouds and floating by. Easier said than done in meditation, but I think there's something here that it is encouraging you to have some kind of practice where you are clearing the pathway mentally for yourself to feel more connected to the messages and more trusting of the messages that want to come through, to be able to have more discernment between what is, what is something that is just a part of you that's really attached to this fear versus what is that higher essence part of you that's coming through. I really love internal family systems and the way that they speak of, which is like a therapeutic practice where we look at every person as is comprised of many different parts of self, and that each of these has their own wisdom, you know, to bring. And so when I'm thinking of clearing the mind, something that's really interesting to me, like that I've noticed over the years is being able to just approach when we have thoughts that maybe we don't want to have, instead of trying to just like push them away, actually engaging with them more. And I'll actually, like, if I'm having kind of an intrusive thought, sometimes I'll just ask myself, hey, who is sending this into my awareness right now? Which part of me is like showing up? And just listen and be curious to see who shows up, versus like entering into my own inner world from a place of fear or from a place of thinking I shouldn't be having these thoughts, or like, you know, that's wrong, but more from a place of curiosity, which is how in that system it's really looked at when we can enter into that self, like, which is really like our higher self. The ways that we know we're there, we're experiencing it, is because we're able to feel like a sense of curiosity. We can be calm. We can hold compassion for those parts, even though we don't necessarily want to be like having those thoughts. We have compassion for what's being brought through. Anyways, so that might be a really good place to start, is just tapping in more with that, like less pushing away the things that you want out of to clear your mind, but more entering your internal space from a place of curiosity instead, and just seeing what plays out there. I feel like this Five of Discs this is like more material, in the material world, than we've kind of been speaking of with this wound. But it is interesting because Mercury is showing up here, which is the mind again, but in Taurus, so in this material realm. And it's once again speaking to like the worry that I was talking about with the Ace of Swords, of like needing to clear the mind from those doubts. And when we are asking this question, so how might we sacrifice our wound? No, sacrifice our suffering around this wound. Like, and thinking about that with the Five of Pentacles, it's like reaching this place of like we're able to, this kind of is coming across as like non-attachment in the context of all of this for me. Like releasing our need to control. I think this is interesting. So to me, this is coming across that way because in the material world, it's easier to think about it this way. Like maybe you have had an attachment around the way it's supposed to look, for your intuition to come through, or like what it is supposed to like feel like or sound like, or whatever it is, to experience some sort of like spiritual ability or connection, whatever it may be. And I feel like that is what needs to be sacrificed. Just this like around this wound, that like there is some sort of final say that some person has, or some like great guru or whatever like has to say that this is how it's done. And like, yeah, instead coming to this place of like utilizing like that more like curious way in every experience that you have in that realm. Like instead of approaching it like, is this what I've been looking for, or like, is this connection, you know, like, is this thing I feel, is that finally the thing that I wanted to feel, you know, or that I was looking for, but coming at it more from a place of like not really being attached to the outcome there, but being more interested in the experience itself. And the way that when we come at things from that, it actually like really continue. It just like, it creates more presence, first of all, from us, which then allows us to tap in even further. Because really, I mean, the main thing about learning how to access our intuition and like any kind of psychic senses, which we all have the capacity to do, is just about being able to be highly focused on things without our minds conditioning getting in the way. I mean, that's essentially it. Like, yes, some people are born with a greater capacity for this just naturally, but these are things that can be learned. So I feel like just practicing like the non-attachment feels like how to, like, that's the sacrifice. Like the attachment is the sacrifice that needs to be made in order, like the attachment to these thoughts or to like a certain expectation of how your spiritual life is going to look, or how your engagement with like your higher self, or whatever words you use that feel comfortable to you, like how that's going to take place, like what's going to transpire, like what's going to happen in your life. Just kind of like releasing all of that and letting that go, sacrificing it, feels like a part of your learning here. So with that said, I want to get the oracle cards. So these were drawn with the intention of asking this question of how this wound is a part of our destiny and our path. So how is this wound a part of Padawan's destiny and path? So we have deep cellular healing, Arcturus energy, physical and emotional healing, along with assertiveness. All right, I really feel like this deep cellular healing card, it's really pointing out the fact of how connected our body is to our mental state, and how when we are in that place of constantly you know, having self-doubt, or just like difficulty trusting our own actions, all of these things that it creates can create a lot of physical issues. And I feel like with this answering, like, how is this part of your destiny? It feels it feels like this is a place where you are learning so much, how to be in your body, in your physical body, in a way that is deeply aligned with your own mind's intentions. Like, I feel like with the assertiveness card showing up at the same time, it just makes me feel like this deep forward momentum that is possible in your life because of this wound, like because you've had to spend so much time strengthening your own connection to your own sense of intuition, and to your own like connectedness to what is beyond you, that it becomes this sort of like force that actually impacts so many more areas of your life, and is that driving force forward. I imagine, experiencing a feeling of difficulty trusting yourself, in terms of connection to something higher than you, and just having that self-doubt around intuition that can feel really depleting, and make it difficult to feel like confident in other areas of life too. So I feel like this wound is like a greater teacher around your own kind of like driving force, like I guess your Mars energy of being able to have your own direction in life and your own ability to really assert yourself to get there. So I think just the more that you're working out these issues and having to really give and devote time to it, it is becoming the medicine in this other way for you having that really stable, just deeply embodied, I guess, direction and path, and feeling confident in being able to move along it in this life. Yeah, and of course in that, like, being able to offer that to others too, like that wisdom that you've learned through this experience. I think perhaps like the actual physical body piece of it for you might be something that just naturally becomes a part of this healing journey, whereas like it may have started with like, or maybe you resonate even more with it being related to your physical body, and you haven't thought about it like that your deepest wound is actually connected to this lack of feeling a connection to something higher than you, and yet it is coming through because everything is connected, right? Like all these experiences that we have in our physical body to like our spiritual self, like they're all intertwined in these ways. So it makes sense. But maybe you're experiencing the physical side of it, and more so, and at this time, and it's actually that this deeper wound, when you are working it over your life, that it's actually going to bring a lot of healing in that realm and in the emotional realm as well of your life. I kind of feel like there's something I'm gonna draw one more card. I don't know why. I really feel like there's maybe one more thing that wants to come out for you. So I'm just gonna pull one more from here. So anything else that group 1 needs to know about how this wound is influencing their destiny? so we have squaring the circle showing up here. And this is really resonant with what I've said before. Squaring the circle is that recognition of the marriage between heaven and earth. That saying, as above, so below. And I feel like this wound is bringing you into this place where you're able to come to greater integration between these differing parts of your experience here. Like I was saying, like between like the physical, the spiritual, the emotional. Like this wound is really, it's almost like your own version of squaring the circle, right, in your own life, of bridging these different, the above and below coming together. So yeah, that it feels like really deep medicine that you're here to bring, and that is being, you know, offered through this wound in particular. It's going to be like a big access point to being able to more greatly understand and embody this energy, which is really powerful. I feel like that did want to come out because that's a little bit more, it's just like a confirmation, I think, of what came through, and it goes a little further than just this assertiveness card. So yeah, amazing. Thank you, Pile 1, for hanging out with me. Thank you for sharing your energy. And yeah, thank you to Chiron for showing up and offering your insights here as well with the North Node. And hopefully I'll see y'all in another reading. I'm posting every Sunday, so I would love to see you again in this space. Feel free to subscribe if you like this, or give it a like. That really helps me and helps other people to find these readings. Okay, I'm sending many blessings your way. Thank you. Bye. Hey, group 2. Y'all chose the teardrop labradorite in this little stack of oracles here. We're going to look at these at the end, so I'm just going to move them to the side. I'm going to start off the reading by asking what Chiron actually wants us to know about this wound. And like I said in the intro, our Chiron wounds are really the ones that we spend a very long time working with, you know, and reworking. And they are the ones that are just very difficult for us to find healing with, but we actually become great teachers around those things because we can spend so much time with them and learning them. So with that, let's get to it. So for collective watching, Pile 2 here. Chiron, what can you offer them? What do you want them to know about their wound? we've got a 4 of discs and the Magician showing up here. Okay, so what does Chiron want us to know about this wound? What does Chiron want you to know? I really am thinking with the 4 of discs here and the Magician, it feels like this wound has to do with security, first of all, and also perhaps security around the voice, security around communication, and maybe feeling a constriction, inability to understand your own limits around expression, like what's too much, what's too little, how to actually utilize your own power to create the things that you want to be engaging with in the world, but specifically like through mercurial expression. And you know, communication can happen in so many different ways. We're not just talking about the voice, but I feel like these 2 cards coming up to speak to this wound, it just has a lot to do with feeling an insecurity around this part of your life, and this being a wound that you are continually working with, to find your understanding of your own way of understanding safety and empowerment in communicating yourself, in letting yourself be understood by others, and knowing the right timing and the right like mediums of how to actually express yourself, and getting out of your own way, perhaps, which all of these, speaking of the Chiron wounds, like can bring that up too, just the way that we can bring our own suffering by getting in our own way. But this could speak definitely to, you know, wounds experienced by other people being a really like oppressive force to our voice, and like not feeling comfortable or safe to let that come through. Yeah, these 2 cards coming together, it just feels like this containment, but in a negative way, that has really impacted your ability to feel like totally empowered in communicating who you are and communicating the things that are important to you. So I feel like, yeah, that's kind of the message that Chiron is bringing through about what this wound is exactly. I'm gonna draw a couple of cards for the second question, which is how we might best sacrifice our suffering around this wound, which to me, I'm looking at this sacrifice as kind of like also the idea of like, what do we need to let go around this wound? You know, however that comes through, that's gonna help us get to also like the medicine of the wound itself too. So, collective, group 2. How might we best sacrifice our suffering around this wound? Pile 2, collective, watching pile 2. Sacrifice their suffering around this wound. Yeah, we have the sun. just a hopeful offering. It's almost like just sacrificing this containment to the pure energy of the sun, right? Like sacrificing or surrendering your worry around these issues of the voice, like letting it burn, you know, like letting the rays of the sun like actually touch you and like penetrate you to where you feel confidence, you know, like you can absorb that sunlight and feel that confidence of self. You know, the sun has so much to do with the inner child as well. So I think one thing when that is coming to mind with this is like a need to sacrifice our ideas of what we hoped for our inner child and just accepting them where they are. You know, it's really, really freaking painful to hold these wounds. Like, this is why Chiron, the archetype of Chiron, is just such an important one to look at, because we can, if we don't find a way to actually, like, you know, move the energy of these wounds, I guess, or like work through the suffering piece, they can cause just an inability to be in this energy of the sun, like an inability to fully reach our potential in different ways, or to feel like it's even possible for us ever. And it's so like, so back to like the inner child, it's like we have these histories that we can't just like get rid of. And that's also the piece of the Chiron story. It's like Chiron was wounded by accident, you know. It's like these kind of circumstances that our life brings us that seem so like just inhumane, or like what is the word I'm like for, like non-discriminatory or something. It's just like kind of like just that concept of like shit happens or something, but it doesn't make it any less horrible. I mean, like the story of Chiron being poisoned on accident and just having to suffer then as an immortal being. And it's like, I think what this card is saying in terms of what to sacrifice, it's like maybe needing to sacrifice the story that you're holding around the child, or whatever part of you that got so like ended up in this place of feeling so oppressed and constricted in self-expression and in this ability to communicate your own sense of self and direction in life, like actually allowing that child to be released from that burden of holding that story. So, you know, doing some work around entering back into those places, you know, visually being with that child and offering up to them all the things that they should have gotten, you know, that you would have wanted for them to have, or the experience that would actually help their voice blossom, things like that. And then kind of burning away that older image to just like let that child part of self be more free. That feels significant, and also like really, really letting yourself release any need to hold on to that story as like something that you're noticing that keeps you away from this energy of the sun, which the sun is like the happiest card in the deck, you know. It's like your ultimate it's just like our ability to experience joy at all, which when we experience great wounds like this, it can be difficult, like way more difficult to access the feeling of happiness than it is to, you know, sit with our sorrow. So I think the thing here is like, it's just saying to use this whatever it is that you're sacrificing of that story, that making sure that it's in service to you experiencing joy and happiness. That's what I'm feeling with that. I'm gonna see what these have here to bring us. So these oracle cards I drew with the intention, the question, which was, how is this wound a part of our path and our destiny? So let's see what I wanted to come through here. We had reciprocity, abundance, and the cosmic heart. Devotion, potency, make your life a moving prayer. I feel like this is so beautiful in just describing how significant it can be when we work through wounds like this in the way that it can impact our entire world around us. This cosmic heart card, it's just like, I just see this like a light expanding in the same way that it is from the sun. You know, when we have released ourselves from the containers that are, you know, actually causing our constriction and not allowing us to grow anymore, it just creates these opportunities, not just for ourselves, but for other people to experience the guidance, experience the beauty, experience greater compassion, all of it, you know, coming from us and weaving through all of our relationships. This reciprocity card is, you know, totally about that as well. I feel like to be in this space, to have this wound, really, really makes it difficult to enter into relationships in ways that are truly reciprocal, you know, where there's actual mutual benefit because you're able to tell each other honestly what it is that you need, where the boundaries aren't so confusing or constricting, where you are like, when you have an easier time opening your heart, letting the heart speak forward, it's then someone can see you more. They know what you actually need, which I think that's where the abundance is coming from. It's like truly working through these things like this. This wound is really leading you on a path in relationship, I feel, specifically too, where you just will experience this greater sense of abundance and can really offer that to other people too, because it is a path through the heart. I know that like I'm speaking so much about this, like this wounding may be like around the voice or around the self, but it is leading you on a path of understanding your own heart space and how to open that up more fully. And that feels like the greater medicine that's trying to come through in this wound, and what you're like learning over time with it. And that is essentially like pulling you into this experience of much greater just being able to see others as they are and to see yourself as they are, which is such a freaking gift. I mean, that's the piece, I think, that why our deepest wounds are so powerful, because we develop this ability to see others in those places too, in those vulnerable places, with like so much compassion, because we have to hold ourselves in that place too. And it just feels like that this wound is really working your heart. And like I almost feel like the solar energy is actually coming from the heart space, which I know isn't like, I mean, it's both, okay? It's all the light coming through, but it just feels like so activated in the heart through this experience that you're going through, and through the lessons that you're learning through this wound. And so I feel like, yeah, like how is it impacting your destiny? Like it feels like very much connected just to your experience of pleasure and of love and of connection in this life. It is like helping you forge a path where you are open-hearted and drawing in the people who can meet you there truly. And it feels like, yeah, such a powerful like opening up and being received at the same time. And because you have carried this wound, it is just like I said, this deep like ability that you have to be able to actually see other people in this as well. And that is like a deep medicine and a gift that you are offering to the world through this wound. Okay, group 2, thank you for sharing your energy with me today, and for the vulnerability that came through. Thank you, Chiron, for bringing to the surface and into our awareness all that we needed to hear today. And yeah, thanks y'all for hanging around. I hope that you'll check out more of my readings. I'm posting every Sunday. And yeah, feel free to subscribe. I would love to have you here. Give me a like if you like this video. Feel free to comment, whatever. Any engagement really helps the videos be seen by more people who need to hear the messages. So I always appreciate that. All right, everyone. Many blessings your way. Bye. Okay, group 3. Y'all chose the onyx here. And these cards, which I'm leaving over here for now, we're going to look at them at the end. So the first question I want to look at with tarot is just what Chiron wants us to know about this wound. Something I'm curious now. I wonder if people coming to this reading like might not even know what that wound is, or might think that it's something else. And I don't know if that's felt true for the other piles or not, but it has been curious, because I'm like, I feel like sometimes that happens where you don't even think, you know, like that's like the actual root, or the root wounding is different than what we actually think. So keep that in mind. This might maybe be something different than you're thinking, but obviously if it doesn't resonate, like you can pick another pile, or this might just not be your reading. But hopefully something of significance will come through for you. So for the collective of pile number 3, we're asking Chiron, what would you like this collective to know about this wound? Eight of Swords, and the Five of Cups. And I think I'm actually going to go ahead and pull the other cards too. The second question is how we might best sacrifice our suffering around these wounds. So that's kind of meant to be, I know that sounds kind of dramatic. I'm just using the words from the intro because I just think it's so powerful when we think of Chiron as having like being wounded and suffering, and then making this great sacrifice, and at that point was then able to be kind of relieved of his suffering through becoming mortal, and being lifted up into the stars. So I just feel like, yeah, asking this question around suffering, like how do we sacrifice our suffering around this wound? So I'm just gonna go ahead and get the cards for that. So collective 3. Does collective 3 surrender their suffering around this wound? We've got Temperance popping out. This is like probably my absolute favorite rendition of Temperance in like any deck ever. So good. I also love that it's called art. All right, group 3. I feel like with the 5 of Cups, I'm just really getting this sense of like, I mean, both of these cards are directly speaking about wounds, like in a more clear way, I think, than the other groups, or more obvious way, I guess. But it feels like for this to be a wound, or like a Chiron wound, it's kind of like progressive or sustained disappointment, perhaps. And just this feeling of being let down over and over again, like in an emotional sense, almost being like so emotionally depleted at this point where it's just like, why keep trying? And then creating this kind of mental narrative that when you do want to, especially like, I mean, because cups are like our emotions, our emotional life, and it just feels like anytime then that you maybe want to take a risk or have kind of like more of a deepened connection in that sense, then this like 8 of Swords really shows up as kind of a self-protective mechanism that has been created from this sustained disappointment, where then there's constant overthinking and really doubting yourself and getting into like thought loops and things. Yeah, this just feels like that heavy weight that can come when we don't trust that things are gonna ever go our way, you know, and we don't know how to trust other people with our vulnerabilities or with our truths, and just how painful that can be, and like depleting, really depleting of our life force. And like it totally makes sense that this 8 of Swords becomes kind of like the way to handle that and the way to deal with it, because it's like, maybe if I change, you know, the way I'm doing it in this way, or like maybe if I understand every single thing of how they could react to me, then it'll be okay. And almost doing that to the degree that it becomes its own like like way that sort of keeps you in this loop and like repeats the cycle, because there's this like over fixation on the other person, on how they may react to you or the situation. I'm not just talking to, it doesn't have to be about relationships specifically. That's just one example. But, you know, in anything, like in an opportunity or something too, it's like trying to figure out, like you're like in this spiral of all the ways that it could possibly go wrong, because you're really trying to protect yourself from experiencing this sense of just deep loss and disappointment that has been this like consistent thing happening over and over again. And when we have these repeating patterns in our lives, it just becomes really difficult to figure out how to break through them, and it can become this thing where we feel like we're just completely like doomed, you know? I mean, it can really bring on the sense of like the world's against us and create that belief like really ingrained within us. I feel like the Chiron wounds are the ones that become our own deep-seated beliefs that then keep us in these loops. Definitely. And this one like has a very strong sense of like the world is against me attached to it. So yeah, if you're in this place and holding this as one of your main wounds, I definitely am offering a lot of compassion and gentleness towards you in this moment. It's not easy to be in that place, and when you start using your mind in ways that are can be really painful. I know it's a difficult space to get out of, so I'm just extending love towards you right now. The second question was around the suffering, how we might sacrifice our suffering around this wound. And wow, what an incredible image to come through of like literally like pouring, you know, these elements to create something brand new, like in a way sacrificing what is to create something completely new. I mean, one immediate thing that's coming in is like, because this card represents art also, is just this like, how can you sacrifice this pain into creative means? How can you use this feeling of disappointment, like channeling it through any kind of creative process, as like almost like a ritualized form of sacrifice, like sacrificing it up to a creative muse or something, like getting, in a way, I feel like doing that like it can create kind of a distance between ourselves and the wound, like, and allow it to have a little bit of lightness there, because there's not so much like there's not like, it's in the art now, right? Like we're not as attached to it. And I think anything can happen in the space of creating. And if you're like able to just fully release into an artistic practice where it doesn't have to be, especially where it doesn't have to be for anyone else, I think that could be a really powerful way to channel, and to offer, like, through this being part of the sacrifice. It's just like through the art. And temperance is like finding that balance. So I think it is also speaking to figuring out how to have a gentler mind space, and finding your way back towards having maybe a differing view, a more loving view of this world, by actively seeking out the ways the things that are good. Like, I try to remember, I can't remember who said this or where I saw it at one point, but I remember seeing like the most cynical thing that was just like, or not cynical, but like the person was like acting like in their most cynical fashion of like, I just need to ask like what's good, you know, like what around me is good right now. And I feel like that is totally maybe something that's needed at this point, is like just like, instead of being constantly in this state of the feeling like the world is against me in every single form, and like actually asking yourself like, how is this for me? What is like showing up like for me in this moment? Like, how is the world actually have my best interest in mind? And maybe even like just speaking those things aloud, or putting them into art, or like writing it down, and then creating around it, maybe like something to where you're honoring the things that are in your favor and that are supporting you. Because when we, you know, hold these deep beliefs, it's not enough to just like say, I trust the world. Like, no, that's not realistic, and that's not kind in any way to like the majority of yourself that has felt like deeply, deeply disappointed. I mean, there's no discounting the fact that the world is really freaking harsh and cruel, and it can be like, yeah, just super harmful. And so I just like getting to a place where we like are slowly integrating more into our daily like thoughts and into the things that we're doing to acknowledge what is working, I feel like is kind of what this card is speaking to as well, in terms of like sacrificing the times of the day that we would spend thinking about how things are against us, so that we can actually access more of how things might be working in our favor. Because when we have such an imbalance, you kind of have to like then realize, oh, I am gonna have to be way more intentional about bringing that back into balance by focusing, which might feel like way more on the other side of things, but it doesn't have to be. Like, it can be like the simplest things. I think just turning our attention as much as possible can be helpful. And even like beginning by just having the awareness of, wow, like recognizing when that kind of belief comes through of like the world is against me, or feeling that way, and not trying to like push it away and be like, that's not true, because there is a truth to that, you know, like that is real. There's no one saying like to not discount that, but there's many truths in life, you know, and like it is true that there are ways that the world is showing up, you know, like does have your best interest in mind in different ways. So the more we can find like the balance of that, it creates an entirely new experience. You know, we don't have to like completely get rid of all of the negative feelings and thoughts and blah blah blah. Like, that is totally unrealistic, and that doesn't actually like support us. And I think we see that in this card, like how freaking beautiful it is when we bring together these different elements and they create a whole new thing. And like, we always, I think it's so important that we learn how to hold the challenging along with the blessings, you know, like this is where our growth happens, when we're able to actually be present with our deep wounds, and also, you know, have the ability to feel and experience the joy beyond that. You know, there's so much growth that can happen in that in-between space. So these oracle cards that I drew, these were to represent how this wound is actually a part of your path and your destiny. So I'm curious to see what we got here. So we had 1 and lost lands, soul memories and gifts. You've done this before. and Hiraeth, longing for home, homesick for the stars. I'll bring them up here. It really feels like with the Hiraeth card and Lost Lands, there's this sense of like wanting to escape this world, right? Of like, if you're in this place of constantly feeling like the world is against me, there is almost like, it feels like this wound is actually pointing you to this greater truth, which is that you do have a home elsewhere. You know, like you were a part of other collectives where you didn't experience this intense feeling of constant like emotional loss and of just deep sorrow. So I feel like part of the destiny or path of this wound, it's actually driving you to come to places of remembrance of those experiences, but in a way that is going to tap you way farther into the sense of oneness, where you're able to be in this world, like to fully accept the fact that like I chose to incarnate in this life, right? And coming at it from a place where you're able to remember like I'm always in those other places too, right? Like time is not linear, and where you have been, whether those are past lives or even future lives, like where you didn't experience this or where it was just way easier, those lives are always present with you. You know, those experiences are always with you. And so it's almost like, but maybe you're not able to experience the entire fullness of that until coming into this human experience and knowing what it's like without it. Like the whole part of being human is to experience contrast that draws us into, pulls us into our own, through our desires then for getting away from those things that we don't want, so we understand what we do want. And I think this wound is just really powerfully bringing you into a place of remembrance of perhaps these other lives, or if you don't, if that doesn't resonate with you, even just like maybe innate abilities or like connections or parts of your life that you haven't been able to connect as deeply with or something, and like this wound is helping you to return to those memories from a new perspective, perhaps, where you're able to kind of like hold this greater understanding of your own belonging within them, and your own deep connection to them, because everything is one, and how that then, it is becoming a gift that you give to other people. It is becoming this deep this like ability that you are going to have to really make people feel at home no matter where they are. I think that's like a huge part of this the offering that you are going to be able to give other people in this lifetime, like the huge blessing, because you've had to go through this experience of feeling that deep emotional loss and these cycles of your mind, and that feeling of like the world's against me, but then coming out and working with this wound to where you come to a place of remembrance and of holding that sense of home within yourself, that it just automatically like allows you to offer that to other people in every single interaction, truly. And that feels like such a huge part of your unfolding path, is like being a home for all of those who feel homesick, all of those who feel lost, and helping them remember that they're always home, no matter where they are. Yeah, it just feels like ripples out into the entire collective too. That's like such a gift. Wow, group 3, thank you. Thanks for sharing your energy here. I think I'm gonna end this reading here. That was really beautiful. Thank you to Chiron for showing up and supporting these readings today. I hope that I see y'all again. I'm posting every Sunday different readings. And yeah, feel free to subscribe if you liked this, if it resonates, leave a comment or like. That really helps me to get I just started this channel, so it really helps me to get more people to see and engage with it who might need these messages as well. So thank you so much. Sending so many blessings your way, and I'll see you in another reading, I hope. Bye.